The Don't Stop podcast is sponsored by the Don't Stop VIP Coaching Program. During this program, we teach you how to get really clear about your design and destiny so that you can be launched into the abundant life that God has created for you. To sign up for the Don't Stop VIP Coaching Program, just email tyler@tylerfeller.com. On this episode of the Don't Stop podcast, we have Tim Storey. First and foremost, he's an ordained minister that God has used mightily around the world in over 75 nations. He's also written 10 books, including his most recent, The Miracle Mentality. He's a life coach who's worked with Kanye West, Iron Man himself, Robert Downey Jr., Charlie Sheen, Stevie Wonder, and many, many more. When he's not life coaching, he's busy working with some of the top executives in the world, like Grant Cardone, Paul Getter, Oprah Winfrey, and the list goes on. What a privilege and honor to learn and grow from Tim Storey on this episode. Well, hey, Tim, thank you for joining my podcast, man. It's such an honor, and I know you're a very busy guy, so to be able to squeeze some time from you, it really means a lot. Thank you for being with us today on the Don't Stop podcast.
No, what a privilege. And we have a mutual friend and our friend Paul.
Yeah.
And so he told us great things about you, what you're up to, and how you decided not to stop.
Dude, I love Paul. He's been another inspiration to me, really helping me figure out, how to make the most of some of the stuff that God's put inside of me. If somebody doesn't know you, because I come from a background that isn't really in the stream that you're in as much, and so they may not know you, how would you describe yourself? What would you say about yourself?
I think I'm first a minister. I went to seminary and studied theology, and from there continued on and on and on in my studies, and then started traveling the world, just serving people, teaching. So I was kind of like a motivational speaker before that was even popular.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think the guys to look up to at that time was probably like a Zig Ziglar.
You're right. Yeah.
And so I started doing that around the world. Been to 75 countries of the world doing that.
Wow.
But I started speaking at 20 years of age is the first time I started going overseas, and I've been doing it ever since.
Now, I know you traveled with Benny Hinn, and you were part of a group that, did a lot of really effective ministry in those years. How'd you get connected to that? Like when you were young, and I think that's a problem that a lot of young people have as they're leaving their teenage years and entering into their adolescence. They're not really aware of all the doors that God's opening for them. And I think it's so powerful when we think about Moses at the burning bush. He was aware enough to know that God was doing something special. He took his sandals off, turned towards the burning bush, paused for a second and waited for God to speak so that he could seize the opportunity that was in front of him. How'd you know to do that?
Well, there's a great guy who's now in heaven, which I can't believe that he's there. And that's a guy named Carmen. So Carmen was...
Yeah, everybody knows who Carmen is because he was like the only Christian singer for that whole era, right?
He was the biggest, he packed out the Dallas Cowboys Stadium. That's how big he was. Carmen used to say, Tim Storey is like the Forrest Gump of religion. And what he meant by that is that, like, how does he get all these opportunities that happen?
Yeah.
And so I feel that, like, when I was at Southeastern University in Lakeland, Florida, that's where I first started college. Then I kept going on. There was a guy by the name of Steve Alessi who has a great church in Miami, and he knew Benny Hinn. And I loved studying signs and wonders since I was 17.
Right.
So I was studying William Branham, Jack Coe, A. Allen, Oral Roberts, R.W. Shambach, Morris Cerullo. And most of those guys became my friends later in life. But so he knew Benny Hinn. And I said, man, I'd like to meet this guy. So I started like working Benny Hinn's book table, that kind of thing when I was in college.
Wow.
And then connected with him. And then, I've been friends with him since then till now. We do ministry completely different, but I respect who he is.
Right.
And then Morris Cerullo picked me up when I was like 22 years of age and started taking me around the world.
Wow. So
Cerullo took me to 22 countries, speaking to 13,000, 18,000. And then Surabaya, Indonesia at 28, I had 85,000 because of Cerullo,
Right.
all the money he put into the convention.
Right.
And then Oral Roberts kind of picked me up at age 25, started having me guest lecture at the seminary, and then the rest became like Forrest Gump history, I think.
Right. Wow. Well, that's incredible. I think there's so many of us that have had opportunities and haven't known how to exactly capitalize on them, or actually really just moving with the rhythms of God or the waves of God and how he operates. It's one of the other things Moses talked about, is learning the ways of God. A little bit after that, though, I know you had some setbacks and struggles of your own, and that really marked you in several ways. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So I think that when you're on stage from 20 to 60 years of age, there's going to be bumps in the road of anybody's life.
Very public, right? In your case.
Yeah. So no matter who you are, but I welcome all those. It's part of life. And, from certain setbacks, I learned certain life lessons that helped me to mature, go on stronger, and help a lot of people. So I don't really highlight like certain setbacks, like that is the pivotal setback.
Yeah.
I think that I call it bugs on the windshield.
Yeah.
If you go from Tampa, Florida to Miami, certain times of the year, there's gonna be a lot of bugs that hit your windshield.
Yeah.
So anybody that's watching right now, they got bugs hitting their windshield that we can call setbacks. So what are you gonna do in the setback? Are you gonna sit? You're gonna settle? You're gonna cement yourself? Or are you gonna decide to do what Tyler says and keep going forward?
Yeah. Well, that's so good. And if you live where I live in the cornfields of Southern Illinois, you get covered with a lot of bugs. I like what you're saying, though, because what you're really saying is it doesn't matter what kind of setbacks you come up against. If you have the mentality, Romans teaches us to be transformed by the renewing of our mind. If our mind has been renewed, then we have a tenacity and a resiliency to come against whatever those struggles are. Setbacks are really, they're just bugs on the windshield.
Yeah, but some of them could be pretty intense bugs. So because I use this as an illustration, as you know, if you get too many bugs, it can cause distractions. I'm going to give you some D's here. Then it can cause delays, okay, because you might have to pull over and scrape them off.
Yeah.
All right. And then it can also cause devastation. So I did all this research on bugs in the windshield because I made it as part of a speech. And there's a lot of accidents that happen because people lose visibility from bugs in the windshield. So there are people here that are watching that you're sick in your body. And so it's caused one of those D's.
Yeah.
Or maybe you got a divorce and it caused something, or you're working through an addiction, so it caused something. So whatever the bug on the windshield is, it can be to the point of devastation and even death.
Yeah.
So I take that all very, very seriously. But to me, I'm really into forget about the former things, do not dwell on the past, for behold, God is doing a new thing. Mm-hmm. So I'm a real forward thinker. Yeah. And that's probably why I draw the type of people that I draw.
I love how you talked about just what God's doing in this season of your life, because you said the miracle mentality, which, by the way, is his new book, and I got it, and I encourage everyone that's listening to go pick it up. You said this isn't a 2-year plan for you. It's a 20-year plan. And I think that's like the epitome of what it means to be a forward thinker.
Yeah. And the thing is that as laid back as you see me now, I'll be this way tomorrow. So, we have all these jobs that I have and all these responsibilities and employees and all these beautiful things that God lets me do. And yet I'm in the moment. I'm fully present, fully feeling, fully alive.
Yeah.
But a lot of that is by renewing my mind at an early age. So I started renewing my mind in the Word of God when I was a teenager and became like an addict in the Bible. And so I really thank God for, how he's allowed me to have a miracle mentality. And when you get it, it's hard to shake a person that's got it that deep.
After God used Tim's story mightily around the world with incredible ministries, he remained true to a prophecy he received when he was 17 years old. And despite hosting popular television show 700 Club, Tim's story made his way back to Hollywood. Yeah, I mean, there is something different about people that, and then especially the Word of God. For one thing, it never turns void. A second thing, we meditate on it. It becomes a part of who we are. The fabric of our DNA becomes God's spoken word. And when he speaks it, literally, it never ends. So that can actually become a part of us. And I think that's so incredible. The thing I love about your ministry is that in a lot of ways, it's innovative, because you were traveling in some of the biggest ministries in the entire world. And then the way that you did ministry completely shifted, at least from my perspective. Was that purposeful innovation, or was it just, every single day trusting what the next path in front of you was that God gave you?
It was very much on purpose. So when Dick Mills prophesied over me when I was 17, I was at a big conference with like the who's who of religion. It's a church of 15,000 in Anaheim, California, called Melodyland. And he prophesied to me, and he says, "You are going to be an evangelist." And I literally went, "Oh, shucks." Because when I thought of evangelist, I thought of like guys with rings going, "I need your money.
Yeah.
Keep us on the air."
Yeah.
I'm like, shucks. He said, "You're going to be used in signs and wonders like very few people have been used. But you're also going to go into the entertainment business, and you're going to unlock people. You're going to be a locksmith." And that's exactly what happened. So I saw this coming. So I remember I was doing a conference. It was me, Joyce Myers, and Jesse Duplantis at the Mabee Center in Tulsa. And that was like my life all the time. I was getting 2,000 invitations a year. I was co-hosting the 700 Club. I was writing for Charisma Magazine, and, going to all of these huge conferences everywhere around the world. And I was at the Mabee Center, and Billy Joe Doherty, who was the pastor at the time, he's now in heaven, he said, "Buckle your seatbelts. Tim Story's about to come." And everyone was cheering. And inside of me, Tyler, I thought, I'm about to pivot.
Yeah.
Because I enjoyed all that and still do. I'm about to go speak at a church of 32,000 people in about 2 weeks. So I still speak at all the places and all that kind of stuff, right? But I am a true evangelist. I love helping the lost.
Yes.
So that's why I helped Robert Downey, who became Iron Man, Charlie Sheen, Kanye West, started with Kanye 15 years ago, on and on and on and on. But I do it in my own way.
Yeah.
And so I think that everybody's calling is unique. So I'm uniquely doing what I feel called to do. But Tyler, to answer your question, yes, I never thought I'd be traditional.
Yeah, I think that's so cool. And in some ways, your public persona, at least in the Christian world, has been diminished by virtue of your purposeful intentionality. But I would venture to say that your actual influence is way more elevated by leaving some of the mainstream Christianity or charismatic Christianity world. It's really popular and has a lot of people. And then you enter into Hollywood and just faithfully start doing what God wants you to do, leading Bible studies. And then people start showing up broken, and you start meeting with them. And that's what true evangelism is, broken people.
Yeah, because the thing is, when you say the charismatic movement or Pentecostal movement, I did a documentary on this, the first documentary that's ever been done on Azusa Street.
Yeah.
So back in 1906, when Azusa Street happened, there was known of maybe 300,000 Pentecostals around the world.
Yeah.
The charismatic movement, as it's known, does not emerge till the late 40s.
Yeah.
With the Latter-day movement, with Jacko, A. Allen, William Branham, and then Oral Roberts. So now, today, we have about 700 million charismatic Pentecostals.
Yeah.
That would be a Joel Osteen, a Joyce Myers, etc. The Redding movement, all this stuff, okay? 700 million. So look how fast we've grown in just over 100 years.
Right.
But that's still just a little lake compared to close to 8 billion people in the world.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So today, if you were to travel, I'm in 90 airports around the world where you're going to see my face everywhere. So there's a company that's secular that just said, I don't know why, we like you, and we want you to motivate people during COVID. So there I am up on these screens everywhere. People take pictures of them every day.
Yes.
I'm in 90 airports. I'm in over 1 million hotel rooms doing the same thing through the same company. Then I write for United Airlines every single month, American Airlines every single month. How many traditional charismatic Pentecostals are doing that?
Right.
So I think we're all called to our own assignments.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I like diversity.
Yeah.
I like to mix it up with my charismatic Pentecostal culture, which I love. That's what gave me the might. But I like to do what Jesus did to get amongst the people and see people set free.
Well, the church that I'm a part of is actually a Baptist church. And I've been doing a lot of research about the charismatic movement. There's a pastor who grew up in my church named Randy Clark, who God touched powerfully whenever he was a teenager, and then went on to have an incredible ministry. And so when I became the pastor of this church in McLeansboro, Illinois, where we're at, and learned about the history of revival that we've had and the history of Randy has taken me under his wing. And literally I've been able to travel to a lot of different places with him and see what you're talking about in the charismatic stream. And I've been in seminary and studying, and that number now, at least from my research, is 800 million. And so it's impossible to look at the stats and say that the future, doesn't belong to the charismatic movement. Really, that's what God's doing. And I just did a sermon series on the book of Proverbs where I talked about what it means to be favored. And if you study that word favored, it's really like this heavy necklace that you wear that other people notice you wearing it. It's like brilliant and it's beautiful, and they just know whenever they look at you. And when you think about some of the doors that God's opened for you, I think it's a couple of reasons, and I would love for you to speak into it. One, you are in your own lane, which means you're not allowing somebody else's path to dictate it for you, or even well-meaning people on the outside that haven't prayed, fasted, and heard from the Lord for yourself. You've heard from the Lord for yourself. And even when they go against what you know you're supposed to do, you keep doing it. And so the Lord honors it. And then I think it's an aspect of God's favor. God's favor opens doors for you with Kanye West and Robert Downey Jr. and Oprah. And so how do we access that? Like, how do you teach people?
So number one, you're teaching good. That's why I'm just sitting here listening. That was good teaching. So Randy Clark, hi, Randy Clark. I'm a fan of his from a distance. We never ran in the same tribe. It's like Motown and country Western music. We were like two different tribes. But I like the way he flows. Mm-hmm. I like that he stays in his unique lane. Yep. And he's got a real depth in the supernatural. I don't even think I go into those levels, but I go into other levels.
You go into other levels.
We do music different, but shout out to you, Randy. I think that favor, as you know, is God's blessings, his bestowment. Favor comes on three things. It comes on a person, it comes on a path, and it comes on your efforts. So Jesus says to Peter, cast out your net for a catch. I've been toiling all night, but I keep coming up empty. The Greek word for empty is kinos. I keep scraping the bottom of the barrel. So Jesus is saying, I just shifted your favor path. Your path used to be you were the fisher man, but I'm about to shift it. Yeah. So favor is on our person. So Tyler has favor on his person. So you're very bright. I could take you to LA and put you in the entertainment business and you'd do well. I can introduce you to a famous agent that I just talked to an hour ago, and you could be his understudy. And I guarantee you would start making it good because you got favor. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean it's your God idea. Right. So favor's on your person, but it's also on your path. Right. So Jesus says to Peter, basically, I've shifted your favor path. Now, this is very, very powerful because I think most people, they're not on their favor path. Right. They spend too much time trying to be like somebody else and they become a discount version of themselves.
Oh, yeah. That's so true.
So favor's on your person. It's on your path. It's on your effort. So people say to me a lot, like, I see you so many places. How could you do so much? I don't know. I'm pretty relaxed because favor's on my effort. I'm not trying to do it in my own strength. I'm doing it with God's super on my natural.
Right. Everything I read about Tim Storey online and spending time with him just reaffirms that he has to be the most likable person on the planet. All he does is affirm what it is that God says positively about you. In fact, 80-time Grammy nominee and 28-time winner Quincy Jones says this: "I call Tim Storey the voice. He's a voice of inspiration and hope that is changing the lives of millions." It's no wonder that Oprah Winfrey gave Tim Storey his own time spot on her Super Soul tour. Soon after, Steve Harvey would as well.
That even though I was trapped in an almost situation, I am an utmost person. See, the real you will make a demand on the you that you've become. You were never created to be almost, nor were you created to be most. To be most means there's a ceiling. If I was to let go a helium balloon today, even though the ceilings are so high, there's a ceiling. But where you're headed, there is no ceiling. Somebody clap if you believe that.
Well, I think that's so good. I had a team of people at my church actually study this idea of how do we get everyone in our church doing the thing, the pathway that God has for them? Because I think that's part of the local church. Our responsibility is to equip people to do the thing that God's called them to do. And in their research, they found out that every person is better than 10,000 other people at something. Well, where we live, there's only 8,000 people in our whole county. So I can honestly stand in front of my church and say, every person in here, you are better than anyone else in the entire county, than whatever it is your gift, than anyone else. And so you need to be doing that. And I think it's so important for us to create opportunities for people to walk into that. And so many people shy away from it. And I think that's what's powerful, just hearing you, watching your story, listening to your teachings online, watching how God's using you. He's opening doors for you and continues to open those doors for you. And that's the pathway. How do you know when it's the pathway versus the wrong pathway?
Well, I love how you're breaking down Ephesians, but let's start with Ephesians 4:1. Walk worthy of the calling that you have been called to do. Mm-hmm. So the word to walk worthy of the calling means the whole idea is to honor, or to step up to the spoken word over your life. So when you were in your mother's womb, Tyler, God had already created this God idea for you. Yeah. Then he gets into Ephesians, as you know, and he says, for you are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good work. So you've already been spoken over, right? So now.
Yeah, in Psalms it says there's a book written about your life.
Yes.
I want to tap into that personally.
Yeah. So then I say, okay, so how do I get led? So there's different ways you get led, as you know, as a pastor. Number one, through the word of God. Number two, through prayer. Number three, and this is very important, people miss this, through the right counselors. There's wisdom in the multitude of the right counselors. Yes. Okay. And then another way we're led is through supernatural insight. It could be the gifts of the Spirit, etc., or even happenings, God happenings that take place. So my thing is, I've been fortunate enough to be able to lean on some amazing people, and not just famous people, but godly people. It could be like a prayer lady from Arkansas. I think of this lady named Faye. She used to just pray for me all the time. And so there's been a lot of intercessory prayer people. They're not famous. I think of Dan, who was just a normal guy when I was in college in Lakeland, Florida, who taught me how to pray. Yeah. We would pray Monday, Wednesday, Friday for an hour at 10 o'clock at night. Wow. I think of Larry, who taught me about studying the word. I used to study the Bible 3 hours a day outside of doing all my homework when I was in college. And Larry taught me the word. The guy owns Goodyear tire stores. Yeah. Wow. And so that's those guys walking worthy of their calling. You're walking worthy of your calling and where you're at. And I'm doing what I do in my piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. There's a report that says half of all of the billionaires in the world right now, 50% of all the billionaires in the world identify as Christian. What about the other half? What about the people that are involved, they have favor, but they're involved in really high influence, markets, and you're getting an opportunity to speak into them? What do you say to them and they don't have a relationship with Jesus? How do you, and I know you're an evangelist, but how do you walk that journey before they're ready to receive Christ?
Number one, I don't want them to join us.
Right.
What I mean us is I think most churches are very broke.
Right.
And so I think what happens a lot of times is that people come to me and they'll name a star, because I work with over 300 entertainers. So they'll say, like, they'll see like on TMZ, Tim Story is working with, and then people will come to me, okay, like, what church is he going to? And is he committed? And a lot of those people I talk to, and even CEOs of large companies that I work with, and the most famous names in the world, they don't want to join our tribe.
Right.
Because they think it's like a multi-level marketing thing. Like they got one big guy and then like a downline.
Yep.
But what they are into is they're looking for Jesus Christ.
Yep.
So what I have been fortunate to do is have these Bible studies in a lot of very powerful people's homes. And then our Hollywood Bible study, my mailing list is now 7,000 people that are connected to my Hollywood Bible study. That's kind of a lot of influence.
Yeah, big time.
And I have these Hollywood Bible studies literally all over the world, where I draw top entertainers, top CEOs, top CFOs, COOs of these different companies, and I'm teaching them the Jesus style, the Jesus way. Now, I want them to connect to a church like yours, okay? That's like a church that's teaching the word of God, and that they're not trying to dominate them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I want that for them, but a lot of times they don't find a church like that. But I am a local church guy, and I pastor a local church.
Yeah, I think that's cool that, you're doing the Hollywood Bible study and you felt it in your heart to start pastoring a local church too. I think it's incredible that at your Hollywood Bible study, because I've been tracking it and seeing what God's doing, there's a lot of people that show up right before they even hit it big. And it's like God actually connects them to you as a place of sturdy foundation. I think one thing that's interesting about Randy Clark, and I interviewed him on Tuesday for the podcast, and so that's going to come out actually after yours. Yours is going to be the first one, but his will be shortly after. We talked about at the Toronto Blessing, which was this incredible outpouring that God used Randy to bring. Justin Bieber's mom was incredibly impacted by it. And when Justin Bieber was just getting started, he put a video on YouTube, showed up at the Toronto Blessing. A group of students began marching him around the room, and then they prophesied over him that God would use him to take back the arts. And then the next week, his video went viral. Yeah. And it's like, and now we see, I just saw that he posts online, he's doing a concert with some of the top worship artists in LA at the SoFi Stadium. And so I think that's so cool. And how many times has that happened to you? God connects you with somebody, Jessica Simpson or whoever else, right before they're about to hit it into influence.
So I'm pulling up a text because he's doing that with my friend, Dominic Russo. So that's Dominic Russo's God idea.
That's awesome.
Okay, watch. So he sends me the ad 2 days ago, and he said, talking about Justin is going to do this thing where the Rams play, and with Kerry Jobe and all these different people. So you're exactly right. So the thing about Justin Bieber is that was the call on his life while he's in his mother's womb.
Right.
His mother then gets exposed, as you say, to Randy, and all this happens. But the mother's got to deal with the little rascal, Justin, who's being a rascal, hanging out with Usher, who I know, and all these other people, right? Mm-hmm. So he looks like, I'm out of control.
Yeah.
I need some more people to march around me. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's usually not a straight line. Okay. And then, he gets involved with Chad Veach, and then he gets involved with those guys and Hillsong and all these different people, Judah Smith, all these young guys that I've known since they're like tiny guys. I've known these kids since they were like teenagers. So, but what I love about Justin is he stayed in the game.
Yeah.
He kept taking the punches.
Yep.
Figuring himself out. Got married, took girls into Jesus. I'm very proud of him.
Yeah, me too.
And he's doing a lot for the cause.
Yeah.
But so are you. So I don't see him any different than you.
Yeah. Or by the way, anyone that's watching this that's going to be in tune with what God's asked them to do.
Yeah, do your assignment. So if you're the carpet guy, prosper where you're planted.
Yep.
If you have 3 kids And people say, oh, I wish I could do more. I want to be the next so-and-so. No, raise up those 3 world shakers to do something amazing. And I think that when you have that kind of an attitude, which I do have that attitude, that's when God gives you these fun assignments. Like what I get to do is a lot of fun assignments.
If there's one thing that Tim Storey would want us to know, the best way to live life is our life fixated with our eyes in heaven, running towards the prize that never tarnishes or fades. So it doesn't matter who you're with or where you're at or what your job is, the most important thing is honoring God.
So look at this thing here. This is a patch. And for some reason it was on my table. That's me as a kid. So it says World Shakers Inc.
Yeah.
So Compton, California, 7 people in a 2-bedroom apartment, lower income.
Yep.
Ends up living in Beverly Hills with an office in Beverly Hills since my early 30s, shaking up that society.
Yeah.
That's got to be some kind of a miracle.
Yeah, I think it's so awesome in your perspective everywhere you go, because someone like me, I grew up in the 8th Force Congressional District in Southeast Missouri. Average income was like $14,000 where I grew up. And you think about those opportunities, you think about Beverly Hills, everybody has it together. And I heard you say just last week, you said that the people in Beverly Hills has the most untapped potential than anywhere else. And I think that's such a clue to, your perspective on life. And you can see.
Yeah, thanks for studying me that well. Yeah, they said what zip code in America or around the world that you've been to has the most untapped potential? I said 90210, because that's where I work. I was just there with a famous actress 2 days ago. Untapped because they get to a place of celebrity, and then everybody gawks at them. Yeah. Okay, and they corner them. Yeah. Okay. And now they're like stuck in that place of celebrity when, okay, so they're famous in this system. Who cares? Right. People like you and me, we're not into the temporal. I'm into the eternal. Yeah. So that's like some kind of temporal fluff. Right. Even in religion, I'm not into the temporal religious hierarchy. Right. Of like who's supposed to be big. I think most of these guys are not even good speakers. Some of these guys that are famous ministers. I don't think they carry much weight, but they became famous in something. Yeah. But who cares about that? Again, it's servanthood, thinking eternal, not temporal. I had a really interesting moment in my own life when I was, 23 years old or something. I had become friends with a guy that I met at a conference. And the next week, I was living in Nashville, Tennessee at the time. The next week, he was speaking at the Bridgestone Arena, which is like, the arena in Nashville. And he asked me to drive him after he got done speaking to the airport. He had like a real quick turnaround. And so I went and he's speaking, there's 20,000 people or whatever. And then we leave the Bridgestone Arena. He's literally pulling his own luggage up the sidewalk. No one on the streets knows who he is. And I thought, man, that's such a powerful lesson. Like in that world, it was a Southern Baptist world. In that little Southern Baptist world, when he's on that stage, he's the most well-known person, but literally 5 feet outside the door. And it just spoke so much to what we're talking about. Like just run in the thing you're supposed to do. Watch God do what he does, and then don't try to look for man for any type of affirmation. It really should only come from God and what you're supposed to be doing. Yeah, and I agree. And I think that the idea of we become such a celebrity culture that even like on Instagram, someone could be famous for like what? Or Clubhouse, famous for what? Or you're a life coach, according to who? So I think it's like the blind leading the blind, and a lot of people are going into the pit. But I think that's why the Apostle Paul talked about lay hands on no man too quick or too suddenly. And there's something about this idea where he says to Timothy, I'm reminded of the faith of your grandmother and your mother, and I'm persuaded that it's in you. Yeah. Powerful, man. So take time to mature, take time to be tempered. Don't try to jump out too soon. Fame is very silly and fleeting. I have my fair share of it, and it's really not all it's cracked up to be. The thing that's awesome is like being a servant of God and having God flow through your life. That's what's awesome. What do you think poisons the potential in so many people? I don't think it's one answer. Like, I think if you talk to me, John Maxwell, and T.D. Jakes, we all probably get 3 different answers. But one of the things that poisons the potential is self-doubt. And so what happens is that even though someone may, I'll use an inner city term, front, like they got it all together, which is how a lot of ministers do. Like, you know, I'm A.W. so-and-so, and they got like an armor bearer carrying their Bible.
Yeah.
You're kind of fronting, okay? So we know that your daughter's mad at you and your son doesn't even want to talk to you. So that's kind of like a front. And that's how I see it from Compton. So what happens to a lot of people is that God calls them to something that's up here. And they know that they're really not that prepared for it.
Yeah.
So that's why so many people front and try to act like something they're not.
Yep.
So I think that one of the things that poisons potential is people not understanding that it's not by might, nor by power,
right,
but by a spirit. See, that I understand about me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not trying to be the guy that just has it all together. Oh my God, look at him. He just walked in.
Yeah.
The room shifted.
Yep.
No, I'm just growing.
Yeah.
And just talking to Tyler right now and just walking worthy of my calling. That's what I'm doing.
And there's power in humility. As Peter says, you know, when you're humble and at the right time, God will raise you up. Well, Tim, I know we're running out of time. I can't thank you enough for etching a little bit of time out of your busy calendar to meet with us today. You have a brand new book out, Miracle Mentality. It's an amazing book. I want to highly encourage anybody that's watching or listening to this, you need to go pick it up. What else do you have going on, Tim? If somebody wants to get connected with you, what other projects do you want them to stay in tune with?
I'm excited about you. Let's talk about you. Look how young you are. You're apostolic. You have an apostolic call on your life. You're going to touch the nations even more. What you've done before stepping out with Randy and all the things you've done, that was part of to get a glimpse of it. But that apostolic calling is going to take you around the world. I think God's going to give you a signature message that you're already working on, but still marinating. He'll give you a signature message that we all need to hear. And so we're going to listen to you. And so I thank God for this time in your life where he is like protecting you in that smaller city / town that you're in. Because there's a season to be silent and there's a time to speak. Ecclesiastes chapter 3. So you've been in a season of silence at times because God has seasoned you and he's seasoning you for the loud that you're going to live. Your life is going to be very loud, very strong in the supernatural. So I'm excited about you. I don't even want to talk about my project. I'm excited. Well,
I really appreciate that. I mean, I receive it in Jesus' name. Thank you so much for that. And, you know, I'm excited about what God's doing in you. And so there we go. We have it for each other. And I just want to thank everyone for taking a second watching the Don't Stop podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube. And we're on all available platforms. Thank you for checking us out. Thanks, Tim. It means a lot, man. Your word means a lot too. I appreciate it.
But don't forget what I said. What I said was accurate.